Jason, do you know Hannah Wesche?
Yes, ma'am.
How did you know her?
She was my daughter.
As of March 8th, 2018, where were you living?
At 4004 Shank Road. It was just me and Hannah that lived there.
There is another house that is seen in that picture.
That is Lindsay and TJ's home. Lindsay was the babysitter. This is Lindsay Partin. I raced back up to her house. I walked in, Hannah was on the floor, and I was trying to tell her to breathe because she wasn't really breathing. Lindsay was kind of walking around asking what she should do. I told her to call 911.
Okay, my name is Lindsay. I'm at 150 Road. I babysit kids.
Yeah.
She just dropped her off, and how old is Lindsay? She passed out. Oh, we felt pretty bad yesterday.
Hannah died from traumatic brain injury due to blunt impacts to her head. Hannah also had brain damage, and that's the problem. It was the blunt force, the tremendous force that went through her brain.
March 8th, 11:42, her interview with Detective Sprague and Detective Lambert. She went to take off her jacket and fell forward.
We walked in, she was in front of me. I had to take off my robe. She looked at me, like, can we do couch and donut? And I said, of course, and she went to take off her jacket and just fell forward. And she couldn't get back up.
March 9th, the next day.
And she fell like that, and there was a wheel. I think she hit that.
12 minutes later.
What accident caused it?
She fell on the door and hit the concrete step.
Well, that's new. That's new information.
When I opened up the door, she was coming through, and she slipped on that concrete step and the metal part. She hit the metal part. And so I got her back up, and she stood up and looked up at me and did say, I want donut and couch, and then collapsed.
10:54, a few minutes later. Well, when I opened the door, I dropped her.
I picked her up with the blanket, and it got tangled up. And when I opened up the door, it got tangled and I slipped. The blanket got underneath my foot and we both fell. She smacked her face on that concrete step, and I hit the door.
From ground level, a simple fall cannot explain this injury. This is much too great a force.
Every time she comes home with a new scrape or bruise, Dad asks her, what happened?
Yeah.
So what is she telling Dad whenever he says, what happened here? What happened there? What happened here? What's the one word or one thing she is saying?
I don't know.
Babysitter. Hannah has been abused. No doubt about it, and it's not her father.
She took all the ketchup out and squirted it into the toilet while I wasn't looking. I shook her, and I remember picking her up and squeezing her, and we did fall.
And then what happened?
I picked her up with the blanket, and that's when we fell, and then all that happened.
Lindsay, did you cause harm to Hannah Wesche on March 8th?
I did not.
Did you cause harm to her on March 6th?
I did not.
Did you cause harm to her on March 7th?
I did not.
Why did you tell the police that you did?
Because I wanted to protect everybody.
What's the truth as to what happened to Hannah Wesche?
What I said in my first interview. We walked in the house and she collapsed.
The cause of death here was brain swelling subsequent to the impact. This whole thing did not occur in 2 minutes or in 1 minute. This took time for the brain to swell. The brain doesn't swell instantaneously.
Did you have a conversation with Jason about your interview with the police?
I did.
Did you tell him that the police told you it was you or him?
Yes.
Was it you?
It was not.
Then who was it? Wednesday, March 7th of 2018, which would be the night before, or the day before.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recall what time you picked Hannah up that day?
It was a late night that night. It was about 7 o'clock p.m.
What did you do after that?
After that, I ended up I had a friend of mine stay at my house, and I dropped him back off at his apartment that night.
You remember telling detectives you went to go get milk?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Did you do that?
No, ma'am.
Why'd you tell him that?
I thought I did. I was just confused. I mean, at the time I was being questioned, I was focused on my daughter.
You agree with me that you told that to the detectives at Fort Hamilton Hughes, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You told, again, that same story, that I went to Walmart to get milk to the detectives at Children's Hospital, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I believe, and I think you do too, that the proper title of this case is State of Ohio versus Jason Wesche.
How long did it take Jason to come over after you responded on this text?
7 minutes, 8 minutes.
You were running late that morning, weren't you?
I may have been a minute late or so, yes, ma'am.
You had to wait a little bit for the car to warm up before you put it in reverse, correct?
No, ma'am.
You didn't?
No, ma'am.
You immediately shoved that thing into reverse and got the heck out of the driveway?
Yeah, when I'm leaving for work, yes, ma'am. I started
Is
my
that when
car.
Hannah fell in the back seat and hit her head?
Hannah never fell in the back seat.
Are you certain?
I'm 100% certain.
Because if she fell in the back seat, climbing over the front seat and hit her head, and it killed her, then you'd be responsible. Isn't that true?
I assume I would, yes, ma'am, but Hannah did not
So
fall in
that's
the
why
back
you're pretty
seat.
certain that that's not what happened.
No, ma'am.
He was never put in an interview room. He was never taken to the station. He's either covering up for himself or covering up for his friend.
Why didn't you throw Jason to the wolves, to the detectives on March 8th?
I didn't want anybody to be in trouble. I wanted to protect everybody.
Did you lie to the police?
I told them what they wanted to hear.
What do you mean you told them that what they wanted to hear?
All of their questions, like leading into it's an accident, did she fall, all of those things. I just agreed with them because the day before, for hours, I told them what happened. And even an hour into that second interview, I told them what happened. They didn't want to hear it. They actually told me they didn't want to hear it. They didn't care what I had to say of my truth. They only wanted their own answers. I felt pressured. I felt forced. I felt bullied.
I believe that Lindsay Partin is innocent. I've known her my entire life. I've never seen her yell at her kids, act out against a child at all. I do not believe Lindsay could have hurt anyone.
Our precious Hannah was robbed of an entire lifetime. Her family was robbed of an entire lifetime of her. No more birthday parties for Hannah. She will forever be free.
Obviously, I'm hoping you give her the maximum punishment you can give her. I hope she never gets out of jail for what you did to my daughter.
I do sentence the defendant, Lindsay Partin, to a lifetime imprisonment with parole eligibility after 15 years.